It's Monday. We've got the go button for our Ovadia Heart Health live stream. Welcome, those of you who are listening. If any of you are listening and watching, please let us know your questions in the comments section that we can address. And I'm really happy to have Janet Needham here with us today. But before we jump into our conversation, do want to remind all of our listeners and anyone who will be watching the recording, this live stream is not intended for personal medical advice. If you're interested in working with the Ovadia Heart Health team, please reach out to us at team@ifixhearts.com and we'll get your medical questions addressed. Welcome, Janet. Lovely to see you.
You as well. Glad to be here.
Welcome. Well, we'll miss Shawn, but we've got lots to talk about. So we'll get going. But first, for anyone who's not aware of all the great work you're doing, can you just tell us briefly a little bit about your background?
Certainly. Both Shawn and I own a custom pharmacy that we started, I think, about 27 years ago, focusing on wellness and hormone replacement, which has launched us into, I think, for now, almost 6 years of doing podcasts and different events, Q&As to help people just get some tools in their toolbox to help live a healthy life. Our goal is to let people make their own decisions in their personal lives, but in that way, they own it and they can thrive and not just exist. I'm super happy to say that this has been very exciting for both Shawn and I. When we left traditional pharmacy and got into wellness, we felt like we were helping people make changes with good decisions and good tools that could guide them in directions that would empower them. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that people need to feel empowered to make changes in their lives. And this pharmacy and all the social media that we are using to help people has been truly exciting. I mentioned earlier before we got on to the podcast was that we are looking forward to having another Northwest Medical Freedom Conference, which brings in some amazing people. We have Dr. Ryan Cole, who's a pathologist. We have Kelly Victory, who is such a fun speaker, but she has worked in public health. She's been on the Dr. Drew show. She's been on all over Fox Network, you name it. But Kelly brings a great perspective to healthcare as well. She's had her own health journey and understands some of the things that we all go through as patients and individuals, as well as healthcare providers. We also have a lovely lady again that's returning, Mary Tyler Bowden, who, if you may know, this physician has been fighting for her licensure for quite some time. And the AG of Texas is now suing the Medical Board of Texas on her behalf. So I'm hopeful we'll have some great news about that. And then we have Renata Moon, who is a Washington State lady who lost her license in the practice, or let her license go here in the state, because of the politics that happened in the past with the pandemic. So I'm excited to hear what she has to say and where her life is going. If I've missed someone, I probably have, but the guest list is just amazing. The speakers are great. And we also talk about how patients can live with informed consent and things that will give them freedom, as well as helping providers navigate the waters and keeping their freedoms and rights in their arena.
It sounds like a fantastic event. And again, if you want to know more about both Shawn and Janet's podcast, they have their own podcast, Health Solutions. And if you want to check out their event, which will be in May, Medical Freedom, encourage you to do all the above. Let's jump right into some questions that we hear frequently. And I've got some great questions also from some of my colleagues here at Ovadia Heart Health. And I see Kimberly is saying hi from Arizona. Hi, Kimberly. And we will I'm here in Arizona as well, so welcome. Good to be in contact. Um, we've talked many times, you, Shawn, and Janet, and we had a lovely opportunity to meet up in person with my husband, Robert. There's enormous pressure and talk about various drugs. So why don't we just go right to it? The GLP-1s,
Sure.
right? The weight loss drugs. How do individuals, what kind of assessments would you do in your pharmacy? There's a good big jump. Many people will just immediately get a prescription for something, whether it's a weight loss drug or statin, and we can get to that conversation. How do you assess, and how can employers help guide individuals to not making that decision right away, but taking more things into consideration?
I think you have a very valid point because weight loss, no matter how you take that journey, you need to have a plan on how to maintain that loss. And I think that is one of the keys that is crucial to once you get to your goal, how do you plan to maintain that? I think, the journey of losing weight, some people can do it very well, but they seem to rebound back. The other thing I think is, you know, it depends on the individual, but how did we get to this place? What's the root cause? I think there's some underlying issues that, just prescribing a drug does not address. It may help with the weight loss, but it doesn't address if there is a cause, whether it's, an addiction thing, or if it's emotional, or it's, not even knowing proper nutrition, I think is a huge one. A lot of people think they're eating healthy, but they may not know what the proper nutrition would be for them to become healthy. So those are just some things I think that people need to have in their toolbox before they jump in. And then realize too, anytime we add a pharmaceutical, it's not natural to our body. So we have to realize what are the pros and cons. What could be the outcome that's good, but what could be a bad outcome? What are the side effects? Are you willing to deal with that? If you're not, what's the alternative to this drug? There might be a better alternative than actually putting something in our body that is from Big Pharma.
Great response there. And I love this idea that it's something not natural. Any pharmaceutical, they don't automatically get a free ride. Can you also enlighten all of us of there's words thrown around these days like microdosing or compounding in the use of drugs. Can you give us the elementary school understanding of what that is, and how and why some that makes a difference in what's available to you?
Right. So I'll start with compounding because that's what I'm familiar. Basically, compounding is really the root of pharmacy. I mean, historically, all the pharmacists would make something up, whether a physician or a nurse or whatever that patient needed. Sometimes it was just the pharmacist. So that has been in history for a long time. It used to be usually more natural products in nature, or now we've moved into more of a chemical standpoint. But really, the definition of compounding is putting more than two ingredients together to make a product. And it's customized to that patient individually, not to the masses. So, compounding now in the United States is um, fairly regulated. And that being said, we do have the presence of state boards as well as the FDA as far as the regulatory part of the body. But for example, when we make a product for maybe a child, the doses that are available for a adult may not be available for a young child or an infant. So we have to change either how it's being delivered, whether it be like maybe in a suspension, or a dose that is able to be used properly for an infant or even a pet for that matter. So we change it into a way that's actually usable for that individual. Hospice is another situation. Maybe you have somebody that can't swallow, but we can deliver it to them in a suppository, or we can deliver it in a cream, or whatever the body's willing to accept in helping that individual. That's kind of what compounding is. Um, the second part is, what was the question? I'm sorry.
Microdose.
Microdosing. Okay.
Right.
So this really came out early on after we learned that the birth control pill was put on the market, and the doses were super high, and people started having side effects from them. So then Big Pharma decided, well, we'll bring the doses down. So we call low doses microdosing, and it's very commonly thrown out in the medical world. For example, low dose this or low dose that is supposed to be safer. Um, yes and no. I think what people really have to realize is that, you know, depending on the medication, a dose can be, for you, maybe okay, but for me, it could be very bad. So it really depends on your individual response to a medication. Um, I'll throw this one out. The most common one, again, is the birth control pill, where we'll say microdosing or low dosing. Yet the effect on the body may not be the effect we really want. In the case of like the GLP-1s, now we're hearing, let's do microdosing so people can tolerate the medication better, and the effects of the medication might be okay for that particular individual, and that can be the case. So bringing it back might come in a better outcome, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to avoid all side effects for everybody, because we know that each person responds much differently.
Very helpful, because those we often, start utilizing words in a field, and there's a lot of ambiguity around
Hmm.
that.
Right.
I had a couple questions from my colleague, Coach Jen, who works with Ovadia Heart Health. She asked, "What are some red flags that someone is over medicated?" And this is very interesting. I was just doing a presentation on longevity recently, and seeing that actually people who are on multiple medications, there's several studies showing now that they actually have poorer health outcomes, right? Particularly the elderly. What would be some red flags to you, Janet, as a pharmacist, that someone is over medicated?
That's changed tremendously over the years. When Shawn and I first came into pharmacy practicing in our profession, it was rare for very many people to be coming back in for refills. So it was mostly somebody that had, like, they were on the therapy for birth control, or maybe hypertension, or it was a diabetic, and it was mostly a type 1 diabetic. Now not uncommon to see people on 20 meds or more. So if that's you, if you have 20 meds or more, someone has not eliminated things that are no longer needed. Most commonly, for example, when I do Q&As in front of people, we might talk about antidepressant drugs. So they were only prescribed for a short-term treatment. They were not intended to be approved for long-term. So we don't evaluate someone in their situation as to, is this still appropriate, and can we help them wean off this drug? I would say that happens throughout a lot of our industry now, even with our cardiac patients. You might have duplications of medications because one doctor, like for example, the cardiologist, put the patient on a certain med, and the primary care doctor did, but neither one of them talked about which one they really wanted, and the patient's going home with both. So there can be overlap. So if you're somebody and the medication is in the same class, it might be overlap. So it's two things for the same thing. So maybe it's medications that should be eliminated over time. Maybe it's duplication of medications that we don't need to continue. So I think from a patient perspective, you probably should ask, do I really still need to take this medication, and why?
So, if we're helping to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their health, they should know first and foremost what every medication is for.
Right.
look for those duplicates, as well as ask themselves the question: is it still applicable? Or would
Mhm.
that be a good analysis there?
That is totally true because there's many times people that have been put on a medication and it doesn't fit the situation still today. Like um, they left the hospital or the nursing home. And now we don't, the issue is resolved and we don't need to continue to take that. So I think really we need to be an advocate for ourselves and our family members and say, why am I taking this? Is it still appropriate to be taking this? If it is it something eventually we can be discontinued on? And what would that look like? So I think we need to have those conversations and ask why. Because if we don't, we just accept, well, the doctor put me on, it might be overlooked.
Yeah, is you have to be your own advocate these days, and I know you and Shawn are both very true to that. Not just in words, but in your actions. What would be some of the medications that you would see frequently that you're able to deprescribe or help individuals come off if they improve their metabolic health?
Right. So when we're talking about metabolic health, one of the most powerful things a person can do, especially when we're talking about insulin and diabetes, is that if we can change how we are eating, changing the lifestyle of eating more appropriate. For example, we know that a diabetic has a carbohydrate metabolism issue. That's what's brought on their illness. If they can change that with their diet, their food, and their exercise, it is possible with the help of your physician to lower those meds over time and eliminate them. People do not have to stay in that disease state with medications. They can do that with food, exercise, and diet. So um, that's very powerful because many times people are put on several drugs in that regimen, whether it's maybe starting with metformin or sulfonylurea, and then they end up on insulin. But really, if they had the right practitioner helping them change what's causing the issue and lowering the inflammation in their body, they wouldn't have to. And we've seen that time and time again throughout our career, and maybe you have too, that with the help of the right prescriber or physician, that we can pull away some of these things that we are taking. I mean, they might be appropriate initially, and we know that there's times where we really do need some of these tools, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's appropriate long term.
And that's a great point. And is to get back to this idea of we might need something temporarily, but to not keep adding to this sort of, wash list of things. Every time something occurs, you just add on. I will say within our practice, certainly one drug we see very quickly individuals be able to have deep prescribed by, of course, their medical professionals would be blood pressure medicine.
Yes.
Once individuals start, you know, implementing a good low carbohydrate, low sugar lifestyle, that is one of the first ones we'll see
Mhm.
that again, working with their medical provider can help them taper off, right? Um, it's an invariable question that we have in our practice. And if anyone's interested in knowing more and wants to reach out to us at team@ifixhearts.com. If you'd also like to know about our employee wellness programs, that's at ovadiahearthealth.com/wellness. And pharmacy and prescription drugs are a huge concern for many of our employers because it's often their biggest spend, really.
Right.
Statins inevitably come up.
Of course.
Statins, if you're not familiar with this and you're listening in, a lipid lowering drug that for many doctors, they'd love to just see put in the water and then we all consume.
Mhm.
Um, what do Let's talk about the cholesterol. I'll often say cholesterol is life. Without cholesterol, we couldn't live. how do you approach the conversation on someone comes to you and says, yeah, my doctor told me I need to lower my cholesterol?
Had one of those today. So we have lost in medicine is the ability to change when we know something no longer applies. Like we know the knowledge has been changed, or maybe it was inappropriate one time. So when I was in pharmacy school, I learned the same thing you probably did as well, Shawn, about that the cause of cardiovascular disease in the United States was the cholesterol levels. And so there was a huge campaign um, to lower the levels over time. We've done that very successfully with the group of statins. They, by no doubt, have done their job about lowering cholesterol. However, what we forgot to remember in this picture is that cholesterol is something that is required for life. We need cholesterol for the backbone of every cell in our body. Our brains require cholesterol. And I know you've probably heard Shawn say this, but the yolk of an egg is full of cholesterol for that baby chick to grow and live and survive and thrive. So it is imperative that we have this in our body. It's natural to us. I don't necessarily think you're going to get everybody to agree as to what is the cause of cardiovascular disease, but I will say this. I do believe we've given it a fair time frame, at least 30 or 40 years, and we still have cardiovascular disease being the number
Number
one,
one.
number one in our nation. We have not touched that at all. It's actually worse, right? So we need to back up in our industry of healthcare and say, well, this isn't obviously working. So what could be the problem? So my approach usually when somebody's talking to me about lowering their cholesterol is, well, what is the number? What are the levels? But what else is going on? And one thing that we didn't mention earlier that we probably should, even with our diabetic, is that we need to look at somebody's fasting insulin. Because if their fasting insulin is off the chart, your body is in a state of inflammation and you cannot take the nutrients into the cell. Well, we think that that could be the cause of more chronic illnesses than we have given it thought to. For example, we think it might be a cause of cancer because your immune system is not ready to eliminate bad cells that we produce every day in our body. We think it can help with diabetes, arthritis, you name it. In the sense of cardiovascular disease, I think it's more important, and I approach this with my clients, address what the elephant is in the room. And for most Americans, it's our diet. We are eating I don't even know if I can describe it as food. It's boxed food, it's sugar, as far as I'm concerned, refined sugars. I think by far that is the cause of most of our chronic illnesses. So to pull it back, what I usually tell my clients, why don't you try with diet and exercise? For example, if they change from eating, box food or drive-through food, and eat real food that can rot, you're probably going to change, and it takes maybe time. It starts somewhere, right? I'm a huge proponent of red meat. I think that it has been uh, kicked to the street, and I know it's coming back, but we've lost the fact that the nutrients that are in our food really are medicine to our body. And I think if we can get away from all the processed, all the chemicals in our food and water and all that, the body will calm down and their overall health will improve. And I know I'm going to hear people say naysayers like, people are going to die without statins. Well, again, just remember 50% of the people that have a heart attack today are on statins. And it's not changing the fact that they are still having a heart attack. So somewhere along the line, we have to realign our thinking and say what is working and what isn't. And I think wellness comes from our everyday lifestyle. And to negate that and not give it more emphasis, I think in healthcare is really sad.
Oh, oh, there's so much in there. It's a great, way to, open up the conversation. And I encourage anyone, if you've got questions for Janet Needham, pharmacists from Moses Lake Pharmacy here. Please put them in the comment section. I want to touch on just a couple things you mentioned. One about the fasting insulin
Mhm,
test. We recently, in one of our employee wellness programs, had very young individual, 20,
mhm,
22, around there. And fast. I think Benjamin Bigman, Professor Bigman from Brigham Young, says we're a glucose centric
mhm.
medical environment, and we need to break free on that. Anyway, back to the story on this individual, young, you know, from several years had gone to a doctor, glucose all normal, fasting glucose number A1C, but had a double digit fasting insulin when we encouraged them to have that as part of our program and plan. And now she's on a complete other trajectory because she was having other issues, but no one ever tested the insulin.
Right.
And I encourage people at all ages, but like I say, she was 23, but there were issues and no one was getting to the root cause. And it really was this double digit insulin here. And this is part of looking, Lisa
Mhm.
Simmons, she's our nurse practitioner, because we need to look under the hood better
Yes.
at what's really going on. Uh,
Yes. And to comment on that, one of the things I think the reason it's overlooked is because we don't treat fasting insulin, we treat A1C, right?
mhm.
So if people are going through the traditional setting, the insurance company is dictating, well, this is what we want to treat, and so is Big Pharma. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at A1Cs, that's not my point at all. But elevated A1C is the history, right? A fasting insulin is right here and right now, and that is going to give you an idea what's happening in front of you before an individual is ever diagnosed with an illness, a chronic illness, because these things are happening in our inside of our bodies, inside of our tissues and cells, well before a physician is presented with the symptoms that he's going to treat. So if you could be in the preventative mode and catch somebody when they're not feeling well and look at things like the fasting A1C, or not fasting A1C, the fasting insulin, excuse me, you can do something very powerful very quickly. And also there's no false sense of, like, when people, you've heard this, my A1C is great, but you're looking at the individual and seeing physical symptoms. You can tell they're not well by just what their body's presenting. We're not treating that lab, right? Or are we? Or are we treating the individual in front of us? So I think getting ahead of something with a lab like that is powerful, and it's really not that expensive.
Yeah. And there are places I know now where you can get your own labs, like ownyourlabs.com is a
Mhm.
great place if you want some independence. I'm sure there's many others, or you can work with someone like you at Moses Lake. Since we're on the insulin, I had another question from my colleague, Coach Jen. How do estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone impact glucose control and insulin resistance?
So it's a powerful question. So I'm gonna jump in right to the most important hormone. They're all important to this question, but one of them in this way is testosterone, especially. And just so you know, as a woman and you're healthy, your testosterone level will be 1,000 times your estrogen level if you're not pregnant. So we have a story to keep sharing with women, right? Like, testosterone is very powerful. Well, how it helps our body is it helps with preventing the abdominal weight, which we know the weight across the abdominal cavity is the bad weight. We don't want that. And we maintain muscle mass. And since I'm in menopause, I will tell you, maintaining muscle mass is a chore. You have to work at it. You have to eat right. You have to sleep, all those things. But testosterone helps us and helps us rebuild our tissue. So if I have better muscle mass, my body's going to utilize the food that I input it and maintain the muscle and not store fat. So insulin or testosterone is really important to that. But imbalances, for example, you brought up estrogen. If
Mm.
somebody has way too much estrogen in comparison to their progesterone, they will be in a storage mode. So they will store their food versus using and utilizing it. So herein comes a trick with this. They may be low insulin or low estrogen levels in their body and they might need estrogen, but the balance of the other hormones like progesterone must be made in order for our body to work properly. So you can have somebody that we call it insulin resistant that doesn't have the right levels of estrogen, and that would be estradiol versus their progesterone. So again, balance is important. And then or progesterone, to jump into that slightly, one of the issues that I see as people age, especially in women, is we aren't sleeping properly. So progesterone is very helpful to help our brain stay in. It changes to L-pregnolone. L-pregnolone tells our brain, hey, let's stay in this REM sleep longer. And as you know, sleep's so important. That's when our body goes to work and repairs and heals us and makes us feel better when we get up. So if you've slept and you had good repair, then you're going to make better decisions. You're going to feel better about yourself. And all the other parts of your body that's supposed to be doing things is going to work out better.
So it's a balance and super important, just the whole hormonal discussion. It's not just about testosterone for the male or estrogen for the female, but it's this complex balance of all of these for both genders, and
Correct.
it brings up a maybe even way more basic conversation that I've been well, anyone listening knows that I'm a big fan of Gary Taubes because it was his work through this, my husband reading, that put us on the journey of understanding that this hormonal situation of insulin as a growth hormone, and
Mhm.
that it's not just a calorie conversation. We've,
Mhm.
like you mentioned earlier, Janet, we've tried the cholesterol lowering for 30, 40 years. We've
Mhm.
tried the low calorie, low fat diet for maybe
Mhm.
50 years.
Yes.
It's time to recognize that neither one of these is working really well.
No, it's the needle isn't being pushed. In fact, it's going a different direction. I think we now have more young people, teenagers and young children that are obese, which was totally unheard of when I was in high school. If you look back at pictures of the 60s and the 50s and the 40s and the 20s, people don't look like how we look today. And that should be frightening to us. Like that it should tell us something that we're all doing something together that we should probably decide to change. And maybe, I'm saying this more as Americans, and I'll share this. My son was in Europe for 30 days. He said he ate well, but he lost like 10 pounds because the food was fresh food, it was real food, and he was moving. He was walking everywhere. So we have to address the lifestyle. And really the cool part about addressing this, and that most of these things that we are talking about with lifestyle, whether it's changing your diet or it's activities or sleep, they're inexpensive. And we all can do that, right? We have the choice every day. We can decide, hey, I'm going to I'm going to stop doing this and just take one thing at a time and work at it. But we're in charge of that. We're in charge of what we ingest, how long we sleep, we have so much power in that.
Absolutely. And then again, it all comes back to taking charge of your health. And we're trying to encourage also employers to helping, educate and empower employees to be more independent on their choices as well. And if anyone is interested in knowing more about our employee wellness programs, We've got a couple case studies from a small dental firm in Oregon, as well as a manufacturing firm in Pennsylvania. You can download for free our case studies, take them to your employer and say, hey, we need to have a metabolic health program. But I just wanted to point out about this difference. And I made a couple funny tweets about it one time. I lived close to 20 years in Europe, various places, the Netherlands, France, England. And I was on a panel once with a woman who was in charge of a childhood obesity program in France. And she said, if I had any advice to give to the US, it would be stop snacking, eat meals. And I have to agree with that. I think one thing, and again, times have changed there. They're having their own issues in various European countries with rising obesity. They're still big sugar consumers. Is this idea of what you mentioned, eat real food, and I like to accompany that, eat real meals. Right?
Yes.
And there is a little more walking and things. Certainly, there's more cycling in the Netherlands than there is here. But when we focus on the real foods, and I am totally with you on that, includes red meat. I think it's one of the most powerful foods you can have. But to encourage people to think they're also, it doesn't have to be expensive. We've made this
No.
idea that being healthy is only for those with a large pocketbook. But, eggs, ground beef, if you can buy from, I know you have you grew up on a farm, and we need to talk about that, right? If you can buy directly from a farmer, we've been doing that, is huge savings. That be creative, and it doesn't have to be, we're not talking ribeye steaks every night.
No, and even if you do, I mean, I think Shawn probably told you that how much our meat intake was, partly because of our young boys, men now. But we get our beef from a local rancher. We get to see the person eye to eye. We know how those animals have lived, and that's super important to me from my background of my father raising our own beef and being a rancher. That these animals that we are going to consume actually live a good life. But I think what we have learned is that, or we've been told that these nutrients are so expensive. But again, if you compare how much, and especially for women, if I eat 3 or 4 ounces of protein, I am stuffed. I am full, right? That never happens with a salad for me. I mean, I love salads. I'm not saying not to eat them, but I'm saying that, there's more nutrients in that meat than there is in that lettuce, right? And so you have to kind of look at, what is in the food that's really fulfilling you and helping you. A box of cereal that's full of sugar, that's really the only nutrient it has. Even if it's fortified, you're really not going to be absorbing that because everything starts in the mouth and you don't even get, the absorption lower down in the gut. So what food is really going to sustain you? And that, I think, we just need to relearn, what is good for our bodies. And I also realize that, my husband does not, per se, he doesn't like fish. I love fish. Well, I have a huge Scandinavian background. We ate a lot of fish growing up. Maybe that's more ancestral for me, but I feel good when I eat salmon and cod and halibut. I feel good when I do that. So we also need to listen to our body and realize, when we're putting something in here, what's the outcome? What is my body telling me? So I reach for those things a little bit more than I might something else. And that's perfectly fine. But I do think we have to put more value on what is really healthy for our body. And protein is one of those things that got kicked to the can, down the street.
Absolutely. Our obsession with calories and the fear of, especially red meat, of too much cholesterol, too much saturated fat.
Mhm.
But to go back to your ideas you suggested of satiety, what's going to last you? I call this food for performance, not food for a
Correct.
punishment or reward.
No,
what's
totally.
what's going to help us? Well, one other question that is a huge conversation, not only in our employer programs, but just individuals in our medical practice, is thyroid, right? It seems like
Mm.
everyone's been diagnosed with low thyroid, high thyroid. Um, Give us a sort of short analysis of how you look at the complexity of the thyroid question.
That is a great point. The thyroid gland and thyroid disorders, I think, are grossly understood. For whatever reason, we went with a standard, and then not saying that that wasn't appropriate measurement at the time, but we started measuring what's called TSH, and it's a thyroid stimulating hormone that our pituitary makes and sends to our thyroid gland to produce thyroid. There's many reasons for that to be off, but typically we start seeing changes in our 40s, 50s, and both men and women. Men are kind of overlooked a little bit, but women get looked at a little bit more if they are having children. But the problem is that we look at just this one number and we say, "Oh, you're fine." Well, you're measuring a hormone that's not the thyroid hormone. So, you know, that to me, we got better standards. We got something better, folks. We can look at what our free T4 level is and our free T3 level. The free T4 level that our thyroid produces in it is an inactive portion of the thyroid gland. The hormone goes out and is converted in our body to when we need the active form, which is the T3 or liothyronine. That liothyronine is the active part in our cell that says, hey, we need to do all these functions and do this. Well, unfortunately, we might have all these people that maybe tested quite off in the TSH, and their physician or practitioner didn't really look at their T4. And the gold standard in the United States is we give them either a generic Synthroid or Synthroid itself to treat their thyroid. Their T4 levels might be perfectly fine, but they're not converting into the active form. So, I mean, that's just one scenario. So, it is very complex, but the way you have to approach it is what's really happening in the body. And many times I will have people that they're on these levels of T4 or the Synthroid, and they're still having constipation. They're still having the symptoms of hair loss or brittle or cold or hot sensitivity, and those symptoms haven't disappeared. So they're undertreated. They're overtreated on part of the world on the spectrum with the Synthroid, but they're not treated for the part that their body is really needing, which is the liothyronine or the active part. So in my opinion, it's really a misunderstanding of how the hormone works inside the body and the feedbacks that's being given. And we just have a cookie cutter way of looking at it. So you will get people treated with way too much of one thing and undertreated on the other side.
And this is so important too. This word symptoms. I'm known in our practice for saying symptoms matter. Right? You can have the numbers, the labs, and have all this detailed conversation. But if you're still having symptoms like you
Mhm.
described there of hair loss or brittle or constipation or still having any kind of symptoms, no matter what the drug is, you need to keep working and get more information.
Right. And really I should note too, I went on thyroid a few years after my second child, and my symptoms were actually I felt I wasn't quite depressed, but I felt I was really off. Like I didn't feel myself. And that's really hard to put on paper. But we know intuitively if we aren't who we have been and something's changing, we should look at, what could that be? And, when I went to my physician or midwife at the time and nurse practitioner, she was just like, oh, you're just tired. You have little children. And, I'm like, no, I there's something else here. And really I wasn't converting very well. So, and it was a really easy fix and it made all the difference.
Great, great that you were able to address that for yourself and encourage many individuals listening to do the same, right? Ask that why question. We started
Right.
out with that, why, and realize that your symptoms do matter. As we get close to our time, I would like to just ask you, what would be some low hanging fruit for our employers as we see working in these company situations, the way to get a broader message out? I know you and Shawn are doing that with your amazing podcast. I encourage anyone to look at Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet. Their podcast have got some great guests on there. What would be some low hanging fruit for an employer from a pharmacist perspective that they could or should be doing?
Well, I'm not a fan of prescribing everybody being on pharmaceuticals
Mm.
first. Like, I feel like we really need to look at lifestyle first. So lifestyle is huge to me. To promote situations where people can get outside and move and walk. Because so many times when people have a big employer, they're inside, they're not in nature, they're not getting outside. So there could be some encouragement for, the employer to allow their people to have a place to be outside during a break, or allow them to walk or move. Or even, I work on a desk, and it looks like you do sometimes too,
Mm.
but maybe it's just a standing desk or a sitting desk,
I have
or
both.
right, or encouraging people to move on the job. I think when I look at from the time I went to school to what we're saying now, sitting in one spot ergonomically to our physical health and mental health is not good. You get far more production out of somebody who's able to move. And I think that movement is going to encourage so much more. I think when I get stressed on my job and I need a break, if I walk around a short little walk outside and come back in, my mental perspective, my ability to do my tasks increase. So I think that would be a very good start. The other thing is, and I don't know how much power you have with this, is don't serve your people junk. Please get some real food in there. I'm not saying that there's not time appropriate, but don't make that the mainstay. Find alternatives, and really I do think people will tend to go there. So if you have a cafeteria or you have something going on, give them some healthy choices.
Those are two great tips. Move more, and go for the real stuff, right? Not
Yep.
the what I call food like substances.
Yep.
Well, you have an event coming up in May.
Yes.
If you want to say just a little bit more of that. And Kimberly
Sure.
from Arizona, we have an event coming up February 28th here in Tucson, Arizona. Reach out to me if you'd like more information about that. Again, metabolic health focus. Tell us a little bit about your event in May. And
Yes. So May 2nd, we're in Spokane, Washington. It's all over our social media, our Facebook, our own Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy Facebook page. But since you brought up Arizona, I have a young lady that's going to come in and speak. Shelly, I want to say Candelera is her name. She is super exciting to listen to. She was a nurse that helped save many people throughout her community with treatments during the COVID pandemic. And she has a beautiful story. I'm excited to have Shelly with us. And she is starting her own practice, and she's been doing this for a while. She got her nurse practitioner degree, and she's focusing on wellness in many areas in her community. And so I'm so excited, because that's very empowering to see people that,
excellent.
she didn't hang it up. I've seen so many people that hang their head up and said, I'm out of this industry. And she's like, no, I'm going to do something, and I'm going to help my people. So she's one of the people. I already mentioned Kelly Victory. Got to hear Dr. Kelly Victory. She's such a phenomenal speaker. But we're going to have other people there too. We have a radio station that will be doing podcasts and help promoting us. And they're on site, called Church and State. We're super excited to have them there. We also have a pastor from one of our churches in Spokane that did not shut down during the pandemic. So he's always there sharing with people. We have a wonderful attorney that has been fighting even for our doctor friend, Renita Moon. He's still, I think, working with that. But, so we have all kinds of people there, as well as our medical community. And of course, Our other promoters, we have nurse practitioner Carl Lambert, who's working in the field of helping patients with hormones and wellness, and then Dr. Richard Edgerly out of Yakima, who's been doing um, cash only clinic for quite some time. He's amazing. He has so much experience. But it's nice to have those people there with us joining with Shawn and I because they're successful at what they're doing and they're making impacts in their community and their stories are amazing. So you don't want to miss out from our speakers to the people that we have that help sponsor it too.
Lovely. Very good. So thank you so much, Janet, for coming on today. We got a world of information for everyone out there. Again, you can grab one of their podcasts, Health Solutions. You can see both Shawn and Janet, more about them on their Moses Lake Pharmacy website. Additionally, if you'd like to know more about what we're doing in the employer wellness programs, please reach out to us at ovadiahearthealth.com/wellness. And if you're working for someone, encourage your employer to start becoming more metabolic health focused. It starts with one voice. We're going to all try to make change. One voice, maybe one dinner, maybe one gathering at a time. Thank you again, Janet.
Oh, it's a pleasure as always. Can't wait to see you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.